Hello, welcome to Civil Engineering 6440, Advanced Transportation Systems. My name is Brian Smith and I will be your instructor for the course. I'm looking forward to working with you this semester as we explore advances in surface transportation systems and the design, analysis, and an overview of these systems. So let's go ahead and dive in and begin the material. What we're going to do here today is to introduce the course to you, introduce this first unit. And again, the course will be arranged in a series of 7 weekly units. And finally, talk about the first case study you're going to perform. So that is the focus of today. As far as the course goes, first, as you should be aware, this course is being offered via desktop asynchronous delivery. So what that means is that all of the material for the course will be available to you online through the Colab system, which we'll look at here in a moment. We will not be meeting in person at any given date or any given time this semester. Everything will be done online. The course will be organized into a series of 7 weekly units. So basically you will have a 1-week period to finish each unit and then continue on to the next unit. We will sequence the course that way to enable us to keep discussions together throughout the semester. So I'm going to introduce, this is the way we're going to do the courses with desktop asynchronous delivery. I'm going to show you the syllabus here in a second with the Colab site, talk about how each unit is structured, talk about the projects and the work you'll be doing, and finally talking about the important forum discussions, which are a big part of the class. So let's go ahead to the Colab site so you can see how the course is delivered. So I am going now to the course Colab site for this summer. So when you go here, one thing you'll notice is that you do not see all of these units listed. Each unit will pop up when that week begins. So with the course beginning on June 10th, at midnight on June 10th, Unit 1 will become available to you. And then you will have until midnight the following Sunday, in this case June 16th, to complete Unit 1. Once the clock turns to June 17th, Unit 2 will pop up, and etc. That's how the course will go. And basically everything you have to complete for each unit you can access through this interface. To begin, let's take a look at the syllabus just to give you a sense of how the course will work. So here is the syllabus for the course. Let me get it to and so basically, again, the course is focused on looking at cyber-physical systems as applied to surface transportation. The course in the past has been called Intelligent Transportation Systems. This is still kind of a term that's used for a broad class of systems focused on traffic management, traveler information, things of that nature. We have changed the name of the course to Advanced Transportation Systems because much of the course now does focus on connected and automated vehicles, which in many cases are looked at a little bit beyond the traditional ITS term. So that is a brief overview, but again, in many ways, this is focusing on using communications, software, sensors to allow us to actively manage the transportation system and vehicles to improve safety, efficiency, etc. Again, my name is Brian Smith. I have been working in this area for over 20 years. In fact, I was involved in the very early days of ITS in the Commonwealth of Virginia, involved in developing some of the traffic control systems that you see now being used in areas like Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, etc. And now my research is very focused on connected and automated vehicles. So this is an area that's very near and dear to my heart, and I will try to do my best to bring in my experience in the field to this course. Here's my contact information. I do respond to email very, very quickly, so please do contact me via email. That's a much better way to get me versus a telephone. For those of you who are in Charlottesville taking the course, you're more than welcome to stop by my office. It's in Olson Hall 102H. I'm happy to talk to you anytime, but again, if you're not in Charlottesville, no problem. Please just email me and we can communicate. Like I said before, the course will be offered in a desktop asynchronous manner. Everything's available through Colab. And again, though, that doesn't mean that we can't talk outside of the normal unit materials. If you have questions or concerns or want to discuss things more, please let me know. We can schedule me in person. We can conduct a Zoom meeting. Anything would be great with me. As I said before, each unit will be, the course will be structured into a series of 7 week-long units. And in general, each unit will have an introductory instructor video, readings, and we're going to primarily use the ITS e-primer, which is an e-textbook published by the U.S. Department of Transportation. You see the link here. We will have forum discussions. This is a very important part of the class where you will discuss topics with your classmates and with me via the online forums. This is a way for us to help each other learn and grow in this material. And then from lesson to lesson, some weeks we'll have case studies that you will complete. Some weeks we'll have projects, for example, application design project. Once we get into weeks 2 through 7, each student will create a video to describe a particular advanced transportation systems application that you will view the student video and in our discussion on that as well. So I'll talk more about the units as we move along, but what's important is to keep up with the units. I will not allow work for a unit to take place after the unit's finished. It's very important that we stay on sequence here to allow for good discussions and good interaction. I do think you have sufficient flexibility in that you can work on these units at the beginning, at the end of the week, what have you, based on your schedule, but you do need to keep up with the weekly schedule. So again, just so you know, each unit will be released on Monday at midnight and will have to be completed by the next midnight of the following Sunday. There will be 2 projects you will be responsible for. Actually, this is. Let me. I will go into this more when we get to the Colab site. But you see here from a grading perspective, here's how your grade will be handled. You will be involved with developing an ITS application description video and lead a discussion on that. That will be worth 1/5 of your grade. You will be involved in designing an actual ITS application. That's another 1/5 of your grade. You will complete a series of case studies. These will collectively be worth 1/5 of your grade. Each week, you will be completing a unit memo to basically synthesize your learning of the week. That's 1 more 1/5. And finally, I will be grading your level of contribution and participation in our weekly discussion forums. That's the other 1/5. So you'll see here there are no exams or tests. This is a graduate course, is very much focused on project work, discussion, that sort of thing. So that is how the course works together. Finally here, this is I present the weekly unit plans, which includes the material we discuss, the material you have to read, anything that's due, etc. So this gives you an overview of the course. But I do ask that you really go by the actual unit on Colab so you have the most up-to-date information. So that is an overview of the course. Now what I'd like to do is go back to Colab and kind of give you a feel for how this all will work. So as I said, you have units listed here, and they will pop up when they are available. You have an assignments tab, which lists all the assignments with descriptions and their due date, and you will be delivering assignments also through Colab. There's a way to upload your documents to Colab, so it will all be contained there. The discussion forums here is where you'll enter discussions. Course resources, an email for all the class. You can check your grades at the gradebook. And finally, I do have an anonymous feedback activated. I certainly am happy to get any kind of feedback via email or phone calls, but if you're more comfortable with an anonymous feature, please do feel free to use that. Okay, so let's take a look at Unit 1, and this again you will see as soon as we hit midnight on June 10th. So here, this is the structure of Unit 1. Number 1, you'll have a unit instructor video to watch. This is a YouTube video. This is what you're watching right now. And you'll have one of these for each unit. You'll also have readings from the ITS e-primer, which I will introduce you to here in a few moments. So you click on these, do this reading. Another aspect for Unit 1 is to pick the ITS application description. So if I click here, that will open up this particular project or particular assignment. And if I open up this document, this describes the assignment. So in this case, what I'm asking you to do is to basically pick a system that has been implemented in the real world and to describe it to your classmates. And you will do so by creating your own YouTube video, which is to be no more than 5 minutes. And I will be strict in terms of that time limit. It should be a 5-minute or less video. And basically what I want you to do is describe this application. Use images, audio, video you get from the web, maybe create your own presentation. However you want to do it, just describe this application to your classmates. After that, you also will guide a class discussion where you will post a series of questions in the forum, and I give you more information on how to do that here. And then it's up to you to guide that discussion, answer questions students have, to pose new questions, to redirect the conversation, to really be the guide for the conversation about this particular project. It's important for us to pick topics that make sense and work well for the course. So what I'm asking you to do here is by this Thursday of the first unit, please let me know what the project is that you're proposing to present. You can do so here in this Google Doc. I will look at these and then get back to you with my feedback. This is also a place for you to schedule your presentation. These will be taking place in weeks 2 through 7. Basically the time and the date you get, or the module that you'll get, is on a first come first serve basis. So if there's a particular week that you would like to present, make sure you sign up as quickly as possible. So again, please make sure you do this by Thursday at the latest. And there's also information here in terms of how to post your discussion questions to the website through this YouTube video, so please do use that. All right, going back to Unit 1 here. We also will have a case study here for Unit 1. I will describe this case study to you here in a moment, but the assignment for the case study you can find right here. 2 important features for every unit are the discussion forums and the unit memos. Let's start with the discussion forum. You see here for the first unit, I have added basically 5 different conversations I'd like for you to be part of. The first one is very easy. Tell me about yourself. So you can click on here, and for example, I can, in this case for me, I can simply say, my name is Brian Smith. I have worked in the field of ITS for more than 20 years. And then you can add whatever information you want to share with your classmates, and they will have that information. I'm not sure what I just did here. I don't want to add an attachment here. Okay. So that's unit. And you'll see here there are multiple conversations that you can join, and I want you to be part of. So I'm asking for you to basically be part of all of these conversations. But that means that it's very important to get involved in the discussions early in the unit. Don't wait until Saturday at the end of the unit to start to jump in to have these conversations. I'm looking for you all throughout the week to discuss the material with your classmates. That's how you'll get the most out of this class. If you wait until the end of the week, just enter in a few comments, it's not going to be as useful for you. So I really do look for you to be part of this conversation throughout each module. And I will basically grade your level of participation and contribution to the discussions. Okay, so that's the unit forums. Finally, going back to Unit 1, the unit memo. Each week, you'll complete a unit memo to basically synthesize your knowledge and what you've learned in that particular unit. So this is a description for each unit memo. I'm limiting these documents to 2 pages at the most. And I want these to contain the following content. One is a summary of the information you've learned about in this unit. That will include readings, projects, application descriptions from your classmates, etc. I also would like for you to discuss what you see as opportunities for future development. What have you learned about? What can happen next? Take what you learned and try to move it beyond the current state of the practice. I also would like for you to tell me what you think are barriers to keep this from advancing. Where do we see barriers to future development, and what do you think can be done about it? Again, the idea of these memos is to give you a chance at the end of the week to pull all of the information together and to synthesize it and try to make sense of it. So please take these seriously. I will look at them in terms of their depth of knowledge and development, and grade these on a weekly basis. So this is an important part of your class. You'll be doing this every module. Okay, so with that being said, that is all the material for Unit 1. So you will have basically, just to recap, you'll watch this video, you will read these chapters or modules from the textbook, you'll complete the case study, which we'll talk about here in a moment, you'll participate in the discussions, and you'll complete a unit memo. So, it will be, this is not something that will work well to leave until the very end of the week. But if you work on it regularly throughout the week, this should be very a manageable amount of work. Okay, so that is a description of the CoLab site, kind of how the class works. What I'd like to do now is shift gears and kind of introduce you to the unit and to the course. So the first thing I want to do is introduce this e-primer, which actually, let me go to this presentation here. This is, again, an online textbook that was developed by the U.S. Department of Transportation as part of what they call their ITS Professional Capacity Building Program, a program that they've created to help practitioners as well as students like yourself to learn more about ITS and prepare for the industry. So again, this is just the welcome to this, and I'm just using their presentation to help guide this. And you see here the target audience is for people in the field, students, and also public officials. This is not purely highway focused. We're looking at transit, etc. And obviously this is internet based. One of the things that just as an introduction here, and you'll read much about this, is that what is ITS, and the definition that USDOT gives here is it applies information technology and systems engineering to the management and operation of surface transportation facilities. It's a pretty good definition. How do we take IT or cyber physical systems and move from a more passive system that basically sits there and waits for people to travel on it to a system that is being actively managed and actively works with travelers to try to get the most efficiency and safety out of it. And you see here this incorporates all sorts of aspects: research, the planning of these systems, the design, integration, deployment. The goals of ITS really are the same as goals for surface transportation in general. We want to move people and goods safely, as efficiently as possible, using just as little energy as necessary to devote as little land as necessary to transportation, and obviously to make it sustainable moving into the future. ITS ideally enhances what we've already invested in the very large surface transportation system infrastructure that's out there. And again, the idea is to support the management and operations from a multimodal perspective and at different regional levels. So an example here, and you'll read about this more in the e-primer, is adaptive signal control. So in other words, how do you detect traffic flow in real time in order to more efficiently manage signal control as a way to essentially cut costs. You're reducing lost time, burnt fuel that's not necessarily to use. You reduce congestion, improve traffic flow, reduce emissions, etc. Active traffic management, trying to better control freeway travel, where we're trying to reduce rear-end collisions due to sudden bottlenecks. Trying to reduce congestion by smoothing traffic flow. Enhancing emergency response to allow for quick responses to crashes, which are essential for reducing injuries and death. And again, we're talking about automobiles, transit, movement of freight, pedestrians. And we're looking at different types from freeways to arterial streets, sidewalks, etc. One of the reasons this has become so important, and this is a bit of a history lesson, but it's still true, we have seen incredible increase in VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, in the past many decades, with a very small increase in the actual amount of capacity for transportation that's been provided. So we're seeing more demand without increases in capacity to meet that demand, which means something has to change in order to more efficiently use what capacity that we currently have. Funding as well is not increased to the level that's necessary to meet the needs. This is a very DOT-centric look at history. The reason I wanted to show this to you is just to make it clear that this is nothing new. We've been talking about these sorts of systems since the 1980s. Now, obviously, technology has improved tremendously since then, but the idea of using information technology to better manage transportation has been around for quite some time. Okay, so the ePrimer has 14 different modules, and we will cover 2 of them per unit. So we'll be able to get through all the modules for the class. They were written by different people, so you'll see different levels of detail, different knowledge bases, basically. But the idea is to give you a good, broad overview of the overall field of intelligent transportation systems. Just to briefly walk you through the content, the first unit here will talk about an introduction to ITS and talk about systems engineering, and the case study will focus on this as a way to holistically design these systems, which are really cyber-physical systems, IT, sensors, communications, plus the hard physical systems that basically move people and goods. Moving into the second unit, we'll talk about transportation management, which really the third module here focuses more on the freeway side, whereas the fourth one gets a little bit more into the signal system side. We will then move, the next modules are personal transportation, which very much gets into kind of traveler information. Also looking at, gets into freight. There's a lot of technology used to better move freight across our system. We'll then move into talking about public transportation and also electronic tolling and pricing. How do we better collect tolls or payment for transit using ITS? The ninth module will look a little bit more at the technology side. Where is the technology today? Where is it going? The 10th one will look more rural. In many ways we think of ITS as more of an urban sort of application, but there are certainly rural applications that are very important. We'll talk about the environment in the 11th module, talk about institutional issues. In other words, this is not just purely technical, but also how do organizations, government bodies work together to enable these sorts of systems. And finally, the last 2 modules, which will be in our final unit, look at connected vehicles and mostly at automated vehicles, which are very much the kind of where we are today in intelligent transportation systems. In other words, as we see autonomy introduced to our surface transportation system, we have the capability to connect vehicles together with wireless communications and to the infrastructure. How do we create a much more cooperative overall system? So that's an overview of the content for the ePrimer. Okay, so now the final part I want to talk about here for this introductory lecture is the case study. So let me move to that presentation here. I'm sorry, I'm at the very end. So the first case study will be focused on the national ITS architecture, which is a very important development that has been created to guide deployment of ITS in the United States. Again, you see this case study is from 2014, which is 5 years ago. Some of the materials are starting to be a little bit dated that we have access to through US DOT. And one thing I want you to be thinking about throughout the semester is what is changing. That this might perhaps different than what you see in these in the case studies in the e-primer. One very simple example is to think about where we were from a cell phone, a smartphone, mobile networks perspective in 2014 versus where we are today. We're in 4G now. We certainly weren't there 5 years ago. You really didn't have the level of traffic data, for example, on Google Maps 5 years ago. No one heard of Waze 5 years ago. Think about how all these things that are changing might influence what you see presented to you in the case study and the e-primer. So the idea of these case studies is to give you a chance to try to apply this material to actual cases. They were developed to mimic what people do in the real world to apply ITS. So basically each case you'll have some introductory information. You'll have information then to complete, to learn about this material. This first case study is to define an ITS architecture for a project. In this case, it's a university-based project, which the idea is to have a city develop a system to support special event transportation. In this case, around a football stadium. And you'll be particularly working with the National ITS architecture in this case study. You see the activities described here, and you'll understand better what a subsystem is, a services, etc., as we get into talking about the architecture here in a moment. This is really kind of a repeat of the information I gave you earlier for the e-primer. But again, just the idea here is, as we said before, there is a need to address demand for travel in a different way than we have in the past. In the past, the idea was, well, we'll add lanes, we add facilities. That is not a sustainable path to our future. So looking at managing transportation systems, there are things we can do. Number one is, can we shift modes? Can we get people out of single occupant vehicles into things like transit and rail? Can we shift times? Can we get people to travel at different times, not only at peak periods, but spread that demand over a longer period of time to allow it to be better accommodated? And then finally, certainly there are times where you do need more capacity. And how do you provide that? Very expensive, but often very necessary. Again, ITS lets us use information and communication technologies. In the past, we've used message signs. Now we see much of this more delivered through applications on cell phones. We have traffic monitoring systems. We monitor where freight is, how we're clearing roadways through plowing operations, etc. So we're trying to develop services as opposed to facilities that address local needs. And we need to know what systems need to be created and the functions that are necessary to deliver those services. And again, it's important to understand ITS doesn't solve everything. It's just one tool we have available to address more comprehensively transportation needs. This case is really focused on what's called incident management. In other words, how do we manage unusual traffic events? Sometimes these are due to unplanned accidents or crashes. Sometimes these are due to planned events, like a major sporting event in a stadium, for example. But what this requires us to do is to have personnel available to manage the real-time changes in the system. We need to be able to provide this information to travelers so they can make better decisions. We need to be able to work with emergency services to better respond to emergencies as necessary. And we certainly, weather is part of this, and the collection of traffic data is part of this. There are many systems out there. One of the things I'm looking for you to do here for the ITS application description is to find systems that are out there and describe them to us. An example here that they're giving to you is the system that is used in the state of Georgia, mostly focused on Atlanta to manage traffic in that very busy urban area. But again, the idea here is in many cases that the departments of transportations create traffic management centers, like you see pictured here, which have access to videos to monitor traffic. They have access to data to see what the traffic flows look like. They can dispatch emergency crews. They can change signal timings. They can change information provided. But basically, the people in these centers are constantly looking to see any disruptions in transportation services and then take action to inform people of them and ideally to take corrective action. So the ITS architecture, it was designed as a way to help put all the pieces together. One of the things that was found way back in the 90s was that yes, this city could build a system and that city could build a system, and all these systems could operate in isolation and not be very effective, because as you travel, you don't care which city you're in or county you're in or state you're in. You're looking for transportation from one point to the next. So how do we make sure systems work together, share data well, are interconnected? And that required the use of an architecture to allow essentially plugging things in together to work well. The architecture that you will see available was originally started in the mid-90s by USDOT. It is still being under maintenance and still used to this date by regions throughout the country. So, again, the idea here is to focus on the functions, not how we deploy ITS, but rather what are we providing. And you see here we look at things like travelers, centers, the vehicles themselves, and field devices. And all of this works together to provide ITS services. We have architecture subsystems, like I said before. The categories of these subsystems are the centers themselves. These are the places that tend to be kind of the nerve center where the information is collected and decisions are made. The field, where the devices are out on the roadway in terms of sensors, control devices, etc. The vehicles themselves. What data do we collect from vehicles? What data do we send to vehicles? And finally, to travelers. How do we get information to people to make better decisions, and how do we collect information from them to better understand what's happening on the system? From a center subsystem perspective, and again, you'll get information about this. I don't want to go into too much depth in this presentation, but you see here there's different types of centers, from tolling to emergency management, transit management, etc. Field systems. How do we monitor the roadway? How do we collect tolls or fares as necessary? How do we manage traffic? These are all parts of the field subsystems. Vehicle subsystems, primarily looking at things like specialized vehicles that are part of our modes, such as commercial vehicles or trucks, emergency vehicles, transit vehicles. Traveler subsystems. This is that basically interfacing with people who are trying to go from point A to point B. In other words, what are travel times? What are available routes? This is something that's seen tremendous change in the just recently in terms of, like I said, apps like Waze and Google Maps, which provide you incredible levels of support for travel that we didn't have available not too many years ago. So this is an example of an area that's changed dramatically in a short amount of time. So an example here is, for this Georgia Navigator, mapping these subsystems. We have a traffic management center here. We have the field system here. In other words, these are the field devices the center talks to, and the architecture helps us to put together the center to the field. And again, connecting these ITS subsystems allows you to have an integrated system that works from end to end. And that's what the architecture's focus is. As you get into the architecture, one of the things that it really helps you with is looking at the data flows or information flows. What information needs to go from one system or one subsystem to the next? And as you design these subsystems, this helps you to make sure that these data flows are accommodated, that we use standards when they're available, etc. And finally, the idea of a service package in the architecture is basically take pieces of the architecture to put it together in something that can more easily or readily be deployed in an area. Excuse me. So, the transit signal priority service package it basically allows for transit vehicles to get priority signal control as they travel down a corridor. So in other words, if I have a bus full of passengers, I want that bus to have a green wave along an arterial corridor to move those people as efficiently as possible, as opposed to perhaps single occupant vehicles. So the vehicle itself is part of this, the transit management system, which then talks to the traffic management system, which controls the signals, and that then connects to the roadway itself that has the devices, that has the actual signal heads that people react to. So again, the idea of the architecture is it helps you go from a need to services you identify through the architecture to actual projects you can deploy. And that's the idea of this case study here, is you're going to talk about the needs for special event management that will allow you to define some services that can accommodate that, and that can then help you create a project for that particular city. And finally, one of the things that's important is to always be able to evaluate the effectiveness of an ITS project at the end, and to have performance measures, and the architecture can help you with that. You have the links to the architecture in the case study assignment that you can use. I'll show you that here in a moment, and then you can complete that case study. So this is stuff we talked about already. Let me go quickly to that case study assignment, and then we will close this description. So here's a case study. You'll see here, this is the National ITS architecture that you can access and need to access to complete this case study. So here you'll see this is the version 8.2 of the architecture, and it allows you to see, from an enterprise view, a functional view, physical view, and a communications view, how this architecture works. So this gives you all the resources you need to complete this first case study. Okay, so I think that gets you off to a good start. We've talked about the course itself, how it's structured. We've talked about the materials you have access to. We've talked about the material in this first unit, which again is introducing ITS, and also the systems engineering process, which is basically the top-down process that helps you to design these systems. So I, again, welcome you to the course. I look forward to working with you, and look forward to our discussion in the online forum. Thank you very much.